Well, welcome everybody. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the 5th of our Rotary in Great Britain and Ireland virtual health fairs. Today you will hear a range of speakers discussing mental health and primary prevention. We hope you will be inspired to take the partnerships and projects forward in your area. And thank you to those who have contacted me from clubs. I'm Hallewell. For Great Britain and Ireland, I'm the Assistant Coordinator, and I look at disease prevention and treatment. And I've particularly been working on partnerships with health awareness, and the health fairs. Joined up Rotary. All areas of focus impact on disease prevention and treatment. It can happen to maternity, women and child health. Our environment has an impact. If you're not well, do you have peace? Internal peace, peace building and conflict prevention. As we've seen from around the world, disease comes from bad water sanitation and bad hygiene. Basic education and literacy, we can push disease prevention and treatment through that. And by working as communities for our community economic development, that helps. Health fairs offer a way of working with partners on a rolling programme. All the projects we undertake help us to increase our impact, expand our reach, enhance participation and engagement, and increase our ability to adapt. And they do give membership opportunities. Within the disease prevention and treatment, it's important that we look at physical and mental health, a holistic approach to the work that we undertake, hence the presentations today. And I'm extremely grateful to all our speakers for their time and would now like to introduce our first speaker. Our first presentation is by Rotary International President Gordon McInally. Gordon gave a moving personal story at the Rotary International Assembly for all the incoming district governors. Although Gordon isn't able to be with us in person, he has given his permission for his video to be shared today. Mental health will be one of his passions, where he feels we can help people worldwide.
Earlier this week, during my opening speech, I asked for Rotary to place a new emphasis on taking care of our fellow members and those in our communities, especially in regard to our mental health. I also promised to explain why mental health was such an important topic for me. And so this morning, I would like to share that why. And to do so, I want to tell you about Ian. Like me, Ian came from Edinburgh. He was born in 1960, which made him 3 years younger than me, but we attended the same school, the Royal High School. Ian grew up in a loving, caring family with a single sibling, his mother and father instilling in their children a good sense of values. He grew up happy. Ian developed many interests down the years that allowed him to make a large circle of friends, and he was always the life and soul of the party. He would often join me and other friends at rugby matches, watching Scotland play and frequently lose to England and Wales in particular. Now, on leaving school, Ian studied computer science at Heriot-Watt University in Scotland. And as an outstanding student in his chosen field, he was in great demand from potential employers as he approached graduation. Like many young Scots before him, Ian left Scotland to work and joined STC in Stevenage, close to London, England. I saw rather less of Ian once he moved away from Scotland, but we were regularly in touch and always caught up whenever he came back to Edinburgh to visit his parents. Ian didn't just have an active social life. He was a great success professionally as well. He won several computer industry awards as his expertise in the field was recognised. When he first relocated to England from Scotland, Ian joined and was an active member of the Rotaract Club of Hitchin. And it was through Rotaract that he met and fell in love with Jean, a very English girl with a very Scottish name. Heather and I were at their wedding in 1989, and a great time was had by all, especially by our daughters Sarah and Rebecca, who at the age of 5 and 3 were asked to be flower girls. Ian's career continued to flourish as his talent was recognised on a wider scale. He and Jean had 2 delightful children, Lucy and Jamie, and they were the happiest of families, enjoying life to the fullest with a beautiful home in Buckinghamshire not far from London and a lifestyle to match. Heather and I, along with our daughters Sarah and Rebecca, would often see them when they visited Scotland, and we would often visit them at their home in England. But somehow, sometime, somewhere along the way, something changed for Ian, and he began to suffer from poor mental health. That black dog of depression, first described by Sir Winston Churchill, gradually overtook the things he once loved, the person he once recognised in the mirror, the life he once lived. It followed him around like a shadow, like a large, lumbering shadow, loyal as a canine. Nobody knew it, not Jean, his wife, nor his family, nor his friends. Like many sufferers of poor mental health, Ian concealed it so very well. I guess it was for fear of being seen as weak, or for fear of being judged, or even for fear of being rejected. Eventually, after suffering in silence for who knows how long, it all became too much for Ian. And on the 8th of February 2014, at the age of 53, while attending a business conference in San Diego, California, Ian took his own life, leaving behind him Jean, Lucy and Jamie, then in their teens, an extended family and a large circle of friends whose lives were changed forever, and who continue to this day to ask themselves the questions: why? What signs did we miss? How much more could we have done? I believe that one of the main reasons Ian and so many others like him reached the point he did was that mental health remains such a taboo subject, that mental health supplies remain very, very short, that people do not reach out to each other and ask the question, how are you? Or perhaps, to be more accurate, how are you really? I've heard it said that the mental health system isn't broken, it just hasn't been built yet. Well, maybe, just maybe, Rotary can, as it has done with so many other things, help build it. I believe that we in Rotary have a big part to play in the de-stigmatisation of mental health, in learning how to prevent issues while also making mental health services more available, and by being there for one another, for asking that question, how are you really? And that is why I want us to prioritise mental health during 2023-24 and hopefully beyond. And in a minute, I'd like you to hear from an expert in the field, Dr. Geeta Jiaram, a psychiatrist and associate professor at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and the founding vice chair of the Rotary Mental Health Initiative Action Group. She also serves on the leadership team of that action group. She's a past Rotaractor, a past district governor, and is currently district foundation chair. And she is the 2015 recipient of the Global Alumnus Service to Humanity Award for Rotary. Working with professionals like Dr. Jiaram, we aim to create a space where people both within Rotary and our broader communities feel safe talking about and addressing mental health issues. We will encourage clubs and districts to take action to erase the stigma associated with discussing emotional well-being, raise awareness of mental health needs for ourselves and those around us, work together on proven prevention techniques, and improve access to quality mental health services. It's a big ask. It's an important task. And I'm asking you to become champions of this effort. But before I finish, there is one more thing I want to tell you about Ian. Ian was my brother, my only brother. And believe me, I don't tell you that to seek your sympathy, but to merely illustrate that any one of us can be affected by the scourge of poor mental health. Any one of us can be left seeking answers to the questions: why? What signs did we miss? What more could we have done?
Thank you, Gordon, for your personal story. And I can assure you, and I'm sure everyone on screen today, that we will raise the profile of mental health. We appreciate your support, Gordon, and you have ours. I would now like to welcome Rotarian Judith Pratt, who I met through our work with Bipolar UK. Judith is Emeritus Professor at the Strathclyde Institute of Pharmacy and Biomedical Sciences at the University of Strathclyde. Thank you, Judith. We look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thanks very much for the introduction, Carol. Could I have my first slide, please? Thank you very much. Well, as you can gather from my slide, I am from the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, where I worked actually for 30 years before moving down south to warmer climates here in Cuckfield, Linfield and Haywards Heath Rotary. I regularly go up to Glasgow and very much enjoy going back to Scotland, and it was incredibly moving hear Gordon McInally's story about his brother. And as a neuroscientist, I guess it's what drives me in my career to learn more about the brain. And I must say, since my career started in the 1980s, we have learned a phenomenal amount about how the brain operates and how it changes in brain disorders and mental health conditions. But as Gordon rightly said, we still don't have a proper mental health system to help people who experience these conditions. And given that 1 in 4 of us are affected, I really think we should make more priority in our society today to help people living with mental health conditions. So I'm going to give you a little bit of insight from a neuroscience perspective of what goes on inside our brains and how that impacts on our behavior. Neuroscience is a very recent field, actually. It's only really in the 80s that it became designated, if you like, a discipline. And it's actually multidisciplinary. People can enter the neuroscience research era movement in many different ways. So we have psychologists involved, we have physiologists, anatomists, pharmacologists, and also mathematicians, engineers, and chemists. It really is a multidisciplinary field working together to understand how the brain operates and how it can change and why it may change in brain conditions. And of course, if we have increased understanding, we are in a much better position to improve treatments. So I'm going to do a little bit of neuroscience with you and then give you a couple of examples of some of the research that's been going on in recent years. Here's a photo of what the human brain looks like. It's about 1.5 kilograms in weight. And it's hard to imagine just by looking at it that our brain controls our every thought and action. They make us who we are. Our brains collect information from the world around us and our bodies and interpret this information to generate our experiences, our movement, our behaviors, our memories. It enables us to speak, to read, sleep, enjoy life, and even control basic functions such as heart rate and breathing. So if you think about it, it's amazing. It is involved in everything we think and do. If you could touch the brain, your own brain, it would feel like a cross between jelly and butter. Here we're looking at just at the outer surface of the brain, which we call the cerebral cortex. It's just a few millimeters thick, but it's absolutely packed full of brain cells. And you can see there's lots of ridges and grooves on this picture. And that allows the surface area to be vast and allow us to pack as many cells as possible in this very important part of the brain. In fact, about 20% of all our brain cells are located in this outer cerebral cortex. Now, just looking at it, everything looks very similar, doesn't it? This doesn't look to be very different in appearance. But the brain is specialized into different brain areas. And on the right-hand side is the front of the brain. And that area is involved very much in our thinking and planning, decision-making. Whereas at the back of the brain, that's the part of the cerebral cortex which interprets visual information and enables us to see things. The information from our eyes is conveyed to the back of the brain and an image is generated there. So the other point I want to make, which is really, really important, is that our brains are very adaptable, or as neuroscientists say, there's a lot of neuroplasticity. We can adapt. If you think about who you are now compared to what you felt you were like 10 years ago, you might feel that you were perhaps a slightly different person. And that's because our experiences in life and our genetic makeup really change as we move through life. So our brains develop based upon our experiences and also our genetic, if you like, biological makeup. It's a combination of nature and nurture, in other words, and I'll come back to that a bit later on. So we've seen what the external appearance of the brain looks like. Let's just look at a single brain cell. Well, I'll show you on the next slide, please. This in green here is a brain cell called a neuron. It's really, really tiny. You have to look at it under the microscope to make it visible. And you can see it's really, really beautiful. And I think that's why many artists have kind of teamed up with neuroscientists to kind of express their work in generating images that are stimulated by seeing visual images like this of the brain cell. the overall area kind of in the middle there is called the cell body, and that's where all your genetic material is. And then the tentacle-like strands emanating from this central cell body are what we call dendrites and axons, and they receive and send information to other brain cells. So we've got just about 100 billion of these in our brains, and each brain cell has about 7,000 connections. So you can think that the memory capacity of a human is absolutely phenomenal. And because all those connections make us individually who we are, because our connections are shaped by our biology and our environment. What I want to emphasize now is these brain cells are not randomly distributed in the brain. They are connected in particular networks that are important in different behaviors. So let's move on to the next slide to take this a bit further forward. So the first, on the left-hand side, we can see the electrical messages. So the neurons communicate in these networks by both electrical and chemical messengers. And the electrical messages here you can see are basically called action potentials, and they travel along the axons and dendrites, so the brain cells communicate. And these messages can go at about 100 miles an hour, which is absolutely quite tiny millivolts of electricity. However, next on the right-hand side image, we see a connection between the brain cells. They're not physically connected. There's tiny little gaps between each brain cell, and these are called synapses. And here we see little chemical messengers being released from one cell to the other. And these are called neurotransmitters, chemical messengers, and they release chemical messengers that you might have heard of, such as dopamine and serotonin. We've got about 40 different chemical messengers in our brains. So these all work together in networks to allow us to have memories, to have experiences, move, and so on. There's no single chemical messenger responsible for any one behavior. It's all due to networks working together, which can adapt very readily as well. So this slide really, I just want to emphasize some kind of key brain areas. The first one is the prefrontal cortex at the front of our brains. And this is very much important in cognition. It's lets you make plans, make decisions, pay attention, to learn more and manage your feelings. So it's kind of a cognitive control center. And it's very important to note that this does not fully develop in people until perhaps your mid-20s. So during that time, lots of network connections are being made from childhood to early adulthood. The thalamus, the green central region here, is a filter of information. If you remember at the beginning, I said our brain receives information from our environment around us and also information from within our bodies. And it kind of filters out what's more important and sends that information to other parts of the brain. If we didn't have that, we'd be totally overwhelmed with the amount of information that we have around us. Hippocampus in blue is another important structure. And this is very important for storing and finding memories. And it communicates with both the prefrontal cortex and other areas such as the amygdala to help us store and find memories. The amygdala in yellow is this tiny almond-shaped structure, which is the emotional part of our brain. It's where our emotional memories are kind of stored. And it's this part of the brain that seems to dominate in young adulthood. Because if you remember me saying that the prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop until you're in your 20s, for example, and it's the prefrontal cortex that allows you to manage your feelings more. And so this is why young people tend to be more reactive and emotional than adults, because the prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop until you're in your early 20s. So now I just thought it would be helpful to highlight some of the research that's going on in neuroscience in relation, in particular, to mental health conditions. And quite a lot of research is going on into finding out what are the risk factors, what makes some people more vulnerable to becoming mentally unwell? Why are some people more resilient than others? And why do some therapies work for some and not others? Very often people have to trial many therapies before they find one that works for them. And how can we harness this information to importantly develop early interventions? Because we can identify those most at risk. We can prevent them becoming unwell, potentially. And we can also, by understanding more, the vision is to develop personalized therapies. So what I want to emphasize is that we talked about nature and nurture, and there's always a debate about, is it nature or is it nurture that's causing someone's mental well-being or ill health, for example? It's actually both. It's both nature and nurture that's important. And there are multiple factors involved. And so the relative contribution of these different factors makes us who we are, of course, but they can also make us vulnerable or resilient to being mentally well or not. And that's because we have a whole range of genetic factors and also are shaped very much by our environment, factors in our lives. And vulnerability in early life adversity, for example, can happen in many different shapes and forms. But that combined with biological factors, your genetic factors, can impact on the way your brain develops. And that kind of altered, if you like, network activity in the brain can ultimately increase your risk of mental ill health in later life. So one of the most amazing things that's been happening in research in the last couple of decades is the huge advances in technology. One of these is the advancement in medical brain imaging, such as magnetic resonance imaging scans. And here are some pictures of these beautiful networks that you can see in the brains of people undergoing MRI scanning. And it's been very interesting in the way we've been able to analyze these brain networks. It's developed hugely in recent years. I've worked with a mathematician in Glasgow who was very interested in analyzing networks, and he was interested in transport networks. And transport networks have hubs, of course. So there's hub regions in, for example, if you have an airline network, you know, New York and London are big hubs, for example. Interestingly, the brain has similar hubs, and those hubs change during different conditions. So we've learned a huge amount about how the brain operates through MRI scans. So this was a recent study, and it also emphasizes the importance of many groups working together. And this was an international study of several different institutes across the world. And they scanned over 6,500 individuals. And in this study, they found that in bipolar disorder, there were differences in brain regions that control self-inhibition and emotion. And they were also able to look at how medication affect the brain networks in these people. And so this is kind of a first step, if you like, into understanding why some medications work for some people and not for others. So this is very important work to be taken forward. As well as brain imaging, there's been a revolution, if you like, in genetic analysis of brain conditions. And I've just highlighted this one study here, which was done by a group in Edinburgh. And they were very interested in combining genetic data from people, young people, who were at very high risk of developing psychosis. And they combined the genetic analysis with the brain imaging MRI scans. In other words, this is big data analysis, it's often trendily called. And using this combination, they were able to identify those young people who are more likely to transition to illness. And so this is really important because it enables us to potentially identify those who are likely to become ill and intervene early and develop also personalized treatments. So this is the kind of research that's going on, but of course it will take a long time to get that out into the NHS, for example. I just want to summarize really, neuroscience research is really on the journey to help improve mental health conditions and brain disorders in general, not just mental health, but things like Parkinson's disease and so on. And through this, we have a better understanding of causes and triggers, which will enable early interventions. We can improve diagnosis, and together that makes a roadmap for us to develop personalized therapies. And of course, together with the improved services and support that's required as well, will hopefully enable people to live well and fulfill their potential in the future. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Judith. Very enlightening. I worked with NHS England for mental health, dementia and neurology. And had I had it explained to me like that before I started, some of the work I was doing would have been easier to understand. It's now my great pleasure to introduce three colleagues, two from Bipolar UK, and I think more than colleagues, they're friends. We've worked together since the partnership began, and Judith is joining Nicky and Lorna as part of the Bipolar UK presentation. Lorna, over to yourselves. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, and thank you for the lovely welcome and introduction, Carol, and thank you, Judith. I found that really interesting. It's really insightful to see how the brain works and to kind of understand from a science perspective, you know, how mental illness kind of comes about, and also exciting to hear about possible research that might help in future. So as Carol said, I'm from Bipolar UK. My name's Lorna and I'm the Strategic Partnership Manager at Bipolar UK. And I've been working very closely with Carol and a number of her colleagues across the past 2 years now to develop a partnership, a very exciting partnership with Rotary in Great Britain and Ireland. So today, I'm going to have Nicky Chinn later, which is very exciting. He's an internationally acclaimed songwriter. You will have heard of many of his songs. He also lives with bipolar and is a Bipolar UK ambassador, and he's going to be talking about his lived experience of bipolar. And Judith Pratt, who we've just heard from, will be speaking again a little bit later, talking about how she's become involved in the partnership as a Rotary cluster champion, and she'll be explaining a little bit more about that. But yeah, very pleased to be here today and to have the opportunity to talk to you, to explain a little about bipolar, what it is, what it looks like, to understand what Bipolar UK do, what services we provide, and about the partnership that we've got with Rotary, and how together we can work together and make a real difference. So as I said, it's a partnership we've been working on for about 2 years, but we were delighted to officially launch it in September of last year. So we're just coming up to our first 6 months of partnership now. We heard from Gordon McInally earlier, the international president-to-be of Rotary, and we heard about his deep connection to bipolar and to supporting mental health. We're delighted to say that he is actually a Bipolar UK ambassador as well, so being fully supportive of the partnership. In essence, our partnership is about reaching and supporting more people who are affected by bipolar so that we can make a real difference together. So we developed a campaign called Could It Be Bipolar last year. And the aim of the campaign is simple. It's a question lots of people might have. And we wanted to get this very short video out to as many people as possible, so they could watch it, understand, you know, what bipolar is, if it's something which is relevant to them or somebody they know or care about, then they know where to go for more information. So we're just going to share that video with you now.
Bipolar is a severe mental illness characterized by significant and sometimes extreme changes in mood and energy, which go far beyond what most people experience in terms of feeling a bit down or happy. Someone with bipolar can have long or short periods of stability, but they can then go low into a deep depression or high, experiencing hypomania, mania, or even psychosis. To help explain the extremes of mood, Bipolar UK uses a mood scale. It takes an average of up to 10 years to get a diagnosis of bipolar. Undiagnosed bipolar can be really difficult to live with.
I struggled from the age of 15, but I didn't get a diagnosis until I was 27. I spent years hiding in my flat and I was fearful of my own mind. I was then given a concoction of medication that wasn't working for me. My emotions were either numbed or I was out all night on benders. If I had received a diagnosis earlier, I could have lived the life I wanted, the life my peers were living.
I'd had suicidal thoughts for a long time when a GP diagnosed depression. For the next 12 months, I swung from serious low moods to elation. I slept all day and stayed up all night. I left my job. I believed I was a millionaire and tried to donate millions to Great Ormond Street. After staying awake for 3 nights, I ended up in hospital.
From the age of 14, I experienced severe ups and downs in mood that left both me and my family confused about what was going on. For a long time, I didn't want to access help because I was influenced by the stigma of mental illness. But when I finally received my diagnosis of bipolar, getting help from the right healthcare professionals who were clearly caring and knowledgeable meant I could gain stability and find hope.
Bipolar diagnosis isn't straightforward. There isn't a single test, and it doesn't show up in a brain scan. Diagnosis depends on specific and sudden changes in mood and behaviour and functioning, not explained by anything else. Getting a diagnosis is important because it means you can get the support and treatment you need.
Have you experienced low moods with little energy followed by periods of high energy when you've been productive, restless or irritable? Had times when you got very little sleep, taken more risks or maybe made impulsive decisions? Been told that you have treatment-resistant depression? Found antidepressants that don't help much, if at all? Do you have a family history of bipolar? If so, it's worth asking, could it be bipolar? Take the screening questionnaire on the Bipolar UK website today.
It's been a really successful video. As you can see, it's short. It gives you an indication as to what the condition looks like, and then most importantly of all, it signposts to more resources to help people if they do have that question, and to give them information and resources which can help them get a diagnosis of bipolar and get the support that they need. We're delighted that that video has reached over 1.3 million people so far since we launched it in October, and we want to take that even further. So with Rotary's help, we hope to get that out to many, many more millions of people who may be truly helped. So we touched on it in the video, but just a little bit more about bipolar. It's a condition that I'm sure most people have heard of, but lots of people still aren't quite sure what bipolar is. So it's a severe lifelong mental health condition, and it's characterized by high moods and by low moods. So at the most extreme, the high moods can lead to things like delusional thinking, overspending, and psychosis, and the low moods can lead to endless suicidal thoughts. So it is a very severe condition. As I said, it's a lifelong condition. There's no cure for it, but the condition can be managed very effectively, and people can and do go on to live fulfilling lives. Lots of people are surprised by the prevalence of bipolar. So we estimate that 1 in 50 people live with bipolar. So that means that, you know, we all know at least one, if not several people with the condition. Now, they may not know they have bipolar. We may not know they have bipolar. And we'll come on to that a little bit later, because over half of people living with bipolar do not have a diagnosis. And for every person that's living with bipolar, we estimate that around 5 additional people are affected very closely through family and friends. As we heard from Gordon McInally, you know, it has a huge, huge impact on the people around them. And that could be emotional support, financial support. But yeah, so when you take into account the people who are closely affected by bipolar, we're looking at, well, at 1 in 10 people. So we really are talking about, you know, a large chunk of the population. So this is Bipolar UK's mood scale. We had a quick glimpse of that in the video. And this is one of our most popular resources. It's really helpful for helping people understand a little bit, getting a little snapshot into what bipolar can look like. Now we've looked at moods and we've put them from a 0 to a 10, the 0 being the most severe kind of depression, and the 10 being the opposite end, what we call mania. But if you look at the middle of the scale, the 4 to 6, that's what we call balanced mood. Now, if you don't live with bipolar, most people will stay within that range. They'll have good days and bad days, and then there will be life events that will sometimes maybe push them slightly into slightly higher elevated moods and slightly lower moods. But generally speaking, they'll stay within that kind of 4 to 6 range, with balanced in a balanced range. Now, people living with bipolar, they have more extreme mood swings. So if we go down the scale into mild and moderate depression, but a number 3, feelings of panic, anxiety, finding it difficult to concentrate, memory becoming poor, needing to stick to kind of routine. And a 2, where slow thinking, less appetite, wanting to be alone, either sleeping too much or finding sleep difficult, everything's starting to become a little bit of a struggle. And then down into severe depression, with a 1, where feelings of hopelessness and guilt, thoughts of suicide, not really being able to move or do anything. And then a 0, where everything is black, endless suicidal thoughts, there's no way out, and just feeling like it's always going to be like this. Now, many people with bipolar are misdiagnosed with depression, because people often tend to go and see the doctor when they're feeling in low moods rather than the higher moods. But the difference between someone with depression and bipolar is that someone with bipolar will have these feelings of depression, but they will also experience elevated moods. So if we look at number 7 and 8, that's what we call hypermania, which is the less severe form of mania. So in number 7, very productive, starting to do everything to excess, feeling creative, energetic, doing lots of tasks. Number 8, where we're rising up the scale, maybe starting to have inflated self-esteem, speaking more quickly, moving more quickly, but things are starting to become a little bit counterproductive. And then for some people, this goes into mania, which is the most extreme form of elevated mood, and becomes, you know, just as dangerous as the severe depression. So we have a 9, where people lose touch with reality, become incoherent, they're not sleeping, they can become paranoid and vindictive, and take part in reckless behaviour. And in number 10, where there's a total loss of judgment, exorbitant spending, religious delusions and hallucinations. And it's at this point that many people become hospitalised or sectioned for their own safety. And this is the point at which many people are diagnosed with bipolar rather than depression. So tragically, someone living with bipolar is 20 times more likely to take their own life than someone without the condition. We also know that 1 in 20 of all people who take their own lives in the UK have a diagnosis of bipolar. Now, I'll come on to this in a little bit, but I've already said that over half of people living with bipolar don't have a diagnosis. So of that 1 in 20 is actually going to be a lot higher. So suicide is a huge risk factor for bipolar. And when we're thinking about suicide risk, we really have to be thinking about bipolar is one of our key considerations. So the Bipolar Commission is a research study that Bipolar UK launched in March 2020, along with King's College London. It's one of the largest research studies using the experience of people living with bipolar of its kind. It was designed to improve healthcare services for people living with bipolar and ultimately to reduce the rate of suicide. Now, there were some really startling statistics came out of the Bipolar Commission study. We discovered that it was a shocking 9.5 years on average to get a diagnosis. Now, if you think about that, almost 10 years, and considering most people develop symptoms in their late teens, their early 20s, that 10 years without a diagnosis, without the treatment and support that could help that person live their life well, makes a significant difference to their life. It's the time of life where they would be going to university, where they may be getting their first job, where they may be getting a promotion, where they may be meeting their partner for life and having children. And the difference between getting a diagnosis and not at that age is the difference between living a good life and not being able to. Some other shocking statistics that came out of the study showed 53.9% of respondents reported impulsive spending and getting into debt. Almost 53% of respondents had lost their job or studies because of their bipolar. 36% attempted suicide because of the delay in diagnosis. So bipolar, as I've said, it affects many, many people, and it represents 17% of the total burden for mental illness. So it really is a significant issue. So we launched the Bipolar Commission report along with those findings at the Houses of Parliament in November last year. Everybody that came along pledged their support to support quicker diagnosis and specialist treatment and support for everyone with bipolar. And we were delighted that we had great support from Rotary on the day. As you can see, there's Nicky Scott spoke on behalf of Rotary in Great Britain and Ireland. We also had Garth Arnold come along, the chair of the board for Rotary, and Robert Morris, who will be taking over from him in July. We had Eve Conway, the international director, Selwyn Foreman, past immediate district governor of London, along with Judith, who you've spoken to today, and Cheryle Berry from the Humanitarian team. So we really were delighted with the support from Rotary on the day. So at Bipolar UK, it's our mission to empower everyone affected by bipolar to live well and fulfil their potential. Now, there's a number of things which people can do to live well with bipolar. Now, medication is a key part. Not everybody, but most people use medication to help them live well with the condition. Now, it takes time to get the right mix of medication and the right dose of medication, but it really is quite vital for most people. Healthy lifestyle is also really important. We found that sleep, it's not only a symptom of bipolar, so whether it's poor sleep or excessive sleep, but also lack of sleep can also trigger episodes of bipolar. So sleep's massively important. Exercise is important, as well as kind of eating healthily. Psychotherapy is a huge help for many people to help manage the condition, as is peer support, and that's what Bipolar UK really specialises in. So peer support is where you're able to speak to other people who live with bipolar or are affected closely by the condition, people who really understand what you're going through. And then, of course, support from friends and family is hugely important as well. So Bipolar UK, we offer, as I say, we offer peer support. We offer callback, so you can speak one-to-one with someone on the phone who is affected by the condition. You can also talk to people by email if you prefer that. We have local peer support groups who are facilitated by volunteers, also affected by bipolar. And those peer support groups, they run both in person and online. And we have a network of groups going right across the country. We also offer national online peer support groups, understanding that some people don't have a local group particularly close to them, or live in remote areas, or maybe have mobility needs, which means that these online peer support groups are there for them. And we have a moderated e-community, which is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It has over 11,000 active users. And once again, it's just an opportunity to just go online at any time and talk to other people who really do understand the things that you're going through. We have a website which is full of information, resources, webinars, all kinds of things designed to help people. We have a free mood tracker app, which you can download from our website. And that's useful for people not only who are trying to get a diagnosis, because they can monitor their moods and use that to show their healthcare professional and aid getting a diagnosis. But it's also useful for people who have a diagnosis and want to manage the condition, because they can really keep track of their moods from day to day, and they can see things that have affected their moods, whether it's times of the year or certain things that have triggered episodes. So it's an incredibly helpful tool. We also have a free annual conference, which is online on World Bipolar Day every year. So that's on the 30th of March. Just 2 days ago, we had our annual conference. And we had 2,370 people dialing in on the day, which was absolutely phenomenal. And it's a great event with people sharing their personal stories. This year we talked about symptoms that people don't tend to talk about. And we had some fascinating interviews, including Alistair Campbell talking to Frank Bruno, which was really quite interesting. So yeah, that's a great thing that we do to bring together the bipolar community, not only across the UK, but we have people from right across the world tuning in to join us on that day. So this year, Bipolar UK are celebrating 40 years. So it's our 40th anniversary of peer support services. And we have created a video to just show you some of the benefits of peer support. So we're going to share that with you now.
At Bipolar UK, peer support is at the heart of what we do. The beauty of it that anyone over 18 who's affected by bipolar can take part. People often tell us that sharing experiences is powerful and stops them feeling so alone. Our peer support groups are led by fully trained volunteers who either have the condition themselves or have a loved one with bipolar. The groups meet in person and online. Our peer support line is a callback service where you can get free advice and support by phone or email. We also have a moderated e-community that's open 24/7 for anyone affected by bipolar.
I've been going to a monthly Bipolar UK support group for almost 7 years. When I first went, I'd just been diagnosed, with absolutely no information or support. Joining the group has been a tremendous help as I've learned about the condition, and it's been helpful in solving some of the mysteries of my life. Finding this space where I can be open, honest, without judgment or repercussion was such a relief after years of guilt, shame, and utter confusion about my inexplicable behaviour. So much so, when I moved recently, a key selection criteria was, is there a support group nearby? Joining, listening and contributing at meetings has been most liberating. Learning from other people's experiences, I now live with self-acceptance and gratitude in my heart. Whether you have bipolar or you're supporting someone with bipolar, I strongly recommend that you'll get significant benefits if you come to a peer support group.
My peer support group is a lifeline. We get together once a month, and from the very first meeting, I felt enormous value in hearing other people's stories. It made me feel less alone and confident that I could get better. I went to my first peer support group in 2016 when I had just left hospital, and it gave me hope and confidence that I could live well with bipolar.
I was so pleased when I discovered the e-community at BipolarUK.org. It's brilliant because you can speak to like-minded people and people who've been through similar things to you, people who are looking for help, who are looking for support, who are looking for a sense of community, and most importantly, who understand.
Hopefully that gave you a little insight into the services that Bipolar UK provides and the value that those services have for people that attend those groups and use the e-community. Next, I'm going to be passing over to Nicky Chinn, who I'm delighted is joining us today. So Nicky Chinn, as I've mentioned, is an extremely successful songwriter. His international hits include Hey Mickey, Lonely This Christmas, Living Next Door to Alice, Tiger Feet, amongst many others. And I'm sure, you know, you've all hummed along to those tunes. I certainly remember singing along to some of them in the car with my parents when I was younger. So yeah, we're delighted to have Nicky today. Nicky also lives with bipolar, and he's a Bipolar UK ambassador. And it's been a delight over the past couple of years to spend some time speaking with Nicky, getting to know him and hearing some really interesting stories. And Nicky has always said to me that you can't possibly understand bipolar if you don't live with bipolar yourself, and I totally agree with that. But I think what we can do is we can listen, we can try to understand, we can empathise, and we can certainly want to help. And so, yeah, listening to Nicky is wonderful. He has a wonderful way with words. Obviously being a songwriter, it's probably hugely helpful for that. And I'm sure there's a little spark of bipolar genius in there as well. But yeah, he has a wonderful way of explaining the intense challenges of living with bipolar, and yet also talking about how he has lived a good life and learned to manage the condition. So yeah, really, really delighted to hand over to Nicky now.
I'm going to read this because it's too long to remember, so excuse that. Not too many people know a whole lot about bipolar disorder. It's a difficult condition to live with and to manage. If today I can give you some small sense of what living with bipolar has been like, a snapshot of my experiences, then I hope I will have piqued your interest enough for you to want to know more. Knowledge is an important commodity. Ignorance can be a dangerous one. There is too much ignorance surrounding bipolar. We must tell as many people as possible about it, in as much detail as possible. Ignorance is damaging. It puts bipolar on the fringes of society, the outskirts of acceptability, leaving it isolated and totally misunderstood. Publicity is the key to this. Bipolar UK, with the PR agency they employ, is at the centre of organising it. It is about education, spreading the word as far and wide as possible, making bipolar more accessible, bringing the discussion out into the open, taking it from the shadows of a conversation that should be happening but isn't, and turning it into one that is, creating that all-important thing called awareness. For me to talk about bipolar, obviously I can only speak from my experiences. So there is no way this is a lecture. I don't believe in them anyway. This is about where I have been, but I'm not untypical. Bipolar has had a significant effect on my life. Depression. For me, it is like time in a bottle. It doesn't move, and it barely breathes. It smothers. Survival becomes a special skill. Conversely, when I am manic, time goes crazy, and I feel like I am going crazy with it. That is bipolar. Those are its extremities. No wonder it isn't understood. There are times I have a hard time understanding it myself. It all began for me in 1961 when I was taken out of school because I was too unwell to remain there. I was 16. I was in boarding school in Bristol. My mood had dipped dramatically. I had been transported to a dark place I didn't recognize. I was a shadow of my normal self. I went to see the college doctor, and he took one look at me and sent me to a psychiatrist whose name I will always remember, Dr. Early. Ironically, by the time I got to see Dr. Early, it was way too late. But then that's life, isn't it? I sat in front of his desk. I didn't say a word. I just sobbed. He asked me a few questions, which I answered through the tears, and then he diagnosed me. Depression. Depression? I didn't know depression was an illness. I thought it was a feeling. But in this instance, it seems I was mistaken. I was 16, and I didn't know too much about feelings, depression, illness, or actually about life. I was just a boy, swimming against the tide and trying not to drown. It was overwhelming. I returned to London, where I saw another psychiatrist, and I received the same diagnosis. But a few months later, I started to behave very differently, even by my standards. I was spending too much money, buying every Elvis record he had ever made. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop talking. I couldn't sit still. I was climbing the walls. It didn't take too long for my psychiatrist to see that these new symptoms and Elvis marked a noticeable change in direction. And that was when the diagnosis changed. Manic depression. More appropriately referred to since 1980 as bipolar disorder, when it was acknowledged the word manic was far too close in meaning and pronunciation to maniac. Had I been asked, I couldn't have given a damn what it was for. I felt far too ill, exhausted from the mania, drained by depression, and completely spent from just trying to survive. But I did have a diagnosis. I was able to tell friends and family that I had a condition. It had a name. I wasn't just crazy. But I was admitted to hospital. Medication seemed to be dished out on a trial by error basis. If it didn't work, try a different color. And the psychiatric jewel in the crown, electric shock treatment. The automatic go-to back then, whether it worked or not. All very scary for a 16-year-old who was both away from home and away from school for the first time in his life. An introduction to fear and confusion as I had never known it. And however hard I looked, I could not find an exit sign. Bipolar is a contradiction of moods. When I am unwell, it usually starts with a hypomanic episode. A state of mind that is so fantastic that if I could bottle it and store it, I would. Everything feels possible. It is a mood state that is often accompanied by euphoria and increased creativity. As I'm a songwriter by profession, that's perfect. There is nothing I can't achieve, or so I believe. I am mistaken. I cannot stay well. Hypomania never lasts long enough. It is a false dawn. The rhapsody is over almost before it begins. Now for the volatility of bipolar. Without any warning, my brain switches to full-blown mania. Out of control, I am flying at the speed of light. It is frightening. But I am soon to be reminded of Newton's law of gravity. What goes up must come down, and it does. Depression, at its darkest and most unforgiving. Like a thief in the night, it steals my mind, my heart, and my soul. It is no wonder that it is a statistical fact that people living with bipolar have a 20% increased risk of taking their own life. When I first heard that, my initial reaction was surprise that it was only 20%. I have been fortunate compared to so many others with bipolar, and I never take it for granted, and I never forget it. I've had a very successful career as a songwriter, and ultimately a successful recovery, both of which I've had to work extremely hard for. There are no freebies in bipolar illness. 28 years ago, I decided to face up to the facts and face up to myself. By that stage of my life, I had achieved all the success I could ever have wanted as a songwriter, but not as a person. I wanted to do better in that department. I was going to do better. I had not always been the person I would like to have been. A little too selfish at times, a little too arrogant as well. Hit records can do that. It was time for change. As it turned out, it was time to go into therapy. Something I've been talking about and avoiding for some time. In the past, I had rarely talked about my pain to anybody. I saw it as a weakness. I was ashamed. Changing that changed everything. Therapy got me to look at my inner self, my better self, and I found it. It was a long search. In my blinkered pursuit for fame and fortune, I had conveniently forgotten it. Locating it was difficult and a torturous journey. There is no easy route to self-awareness, and there is certainly no easy route to change. I found running from the truth is a skill that was easily acquired, but not so easily overcome. Denial had become a bad habit. I embarked on some extremely hard, soul-searching, and painful work. The truth often hurts. It was around this time I discovered group therapy. The effect it had on me was life-changing, a revelation, the togetherness, the honesty, the sharing. We shared our pain, our anger, our sadness, and our joy. We supported each other through thick and thin, but we were willing to challenge each other as well. A group must never get too comfortable or complacent. I came to realize I was not the only one who had been in pain. There can be, and for me there had been, a tremendous sense of aloneness in bipolar illness and a great sense of shame. Those feelings can be crippling. In a group, they don't exist. There is no judgment and there is no shame. And I found two things I had never experienced all the years of great acclaim and commercial success: peace and personal happiness. And something I had never even realized existed. I thought it was just a rumor: self-esteem. And if anyone tells you that success brings self-esteem, they are wrong. I had to find it and build it for myself. I had to learn to like myself, an unfamiliar experience. But this was a personal endeavor, a personal journey, and a personal achievement. It has been no coincidence that the two outstanding events of my life happened after I started therapy. I got well and stayed well, a tremendous and hard-fought-for victory. And then I met a wonderful woman called Vanessa, and I married her. Without my newfound self-esteem, neither of those would have taken place. A whole new life. Now, when I look at the big picture, I wouldn't change a thing. Bipolar is a part of me, and I am a part of it. It is who I am, who I have always been, and will always be. Don't misunderstand me, it's not my identity. My identity is Nicky. That's who's on my birth certificate. But bipolar is in my DNA. It is part of my happiness, my sadness, my pain, my healing, my humor, my empathy, my anger, my forgiveness, my tranquility. And I've had to learn to accept bipolar and its many vagaries, living with it day in, day out, all of my life. That has by no means always been straightforward. It has been dreadful, and it has been wonderful. The opposites, the extremes. This is the intrinsic nature of bipolar. My illness, my wellness. The illness shaped me, it was bound to. It has been a central factor in my life. It has been a focal point since the beginning. Then there is the wellness, the celebration, the victory and satisfaction of building a new life and getting healthy. They have been focal points as well. However difficult it has been okay. Because at its best, it has been amazing. I've had the joy of giving music to the world that has made the world sing along and smile, and on occasions dance, I hope. I may have had a damn good look at hell, but I've had an even closer look at heaven. I started off today talking about knowledge, ignorance, and awareness. And I'm going to end on a similar note. Awareness is one of the most significant issues facing bipolar. There is just not enough of it. Too many people still see bipolar sufferers as crazy, largely because of the mania. Again, because of the mania, too many people are frightened of bipolar. They don't need to be. But we must educate. We must get the information out there. There is a big job to do when it comes to stigma. There is still far too much of it, and it is damaging and it is wounding. The only way to reduce it is by way of education. I happen to believe there is nothing more effective than word of mouth. If everyone who has been here today would talk to friends and acquaintances about this, then you will be part of an important education system. You will be telling them what you know about bipolar. And hopefully, if I haven't been too boring, it is more than it was 20 minutes ago. You will be ambassadors, and we need ambassadors. We need you. Billie Jean King once said, "Pressure is a privilege." She was right. I have to tell you, living with bipolar has been one hell of a pressure, but it has also been one hell of a privilege. And thank you very much for inviting me today.
Thank you so much, Nicky. Thanks for sharing your story so openly and for helping us to understand. Maybe we can't fully understand, as you say, but for helping us understand as much as we can what it's like to live with bipolar. And you speak so openly about the highs and about the lows. And as you say, it's just so important that we hear these stories, that we talk about it. And the more we talk about it, the more people have some understanding of the condition, you know, the more difference we can make together. Thank you, Nicky. And if we could move on to the next slide. So how can we work together? How can we do what Nicky's asked us to do and to really make a difference and talk to the world? We've formed a partnership with Rotary in Great Britain and Ireland, and the partnership is focused around Rotary's 4 action points. So it's about reaching far, far more people who are affected by bipolar, making a big impact. Together we can reach people, we can make a huge impact. You know, we can tell our stories, and we can improve our services, we can get our services out to more people, get support to more people, so that they are able to make, you know, life impacting changes to their lives. Engagement, we can engage, you know, Rotary members, we can engage our communities to get involved, to be talking about bipolar, and to be promoting support services that are available to everyone. And we can adapt our thinking, we can think differently about mental health, we can really consider the challenges that other people have to live with, and just work together to create a better world and a better understanding of bipolar and mental health. We've created a partnership website, especially for Rotary members to have a look at. It's here, it's www.bipolaruk.org/Rotary. And if you can't remember the website address, you can just type Rotary and Bipolar UK into Google, and it will come up.
And I think, yes, it's...
So please do have a look at the website. It has lots of information about bipolar, about the work that we do, about what we're trying to achieve as a partnership, and it has resources, interviews, videos, all sorts of things there for you to use. One of the huge ways you can make an impact is by sharing our Could It Be Bipolar campaign video, which we showed at the beginning of this session. As I say, it's a 3-minute video. Lots of people have the question, could it be bipolar, whether about themselves or about somebody they know or care about. So it's a very easy thing to do, to watch the video, to share it widely, and that really could reach out to somebody who needs that information. You can also take our e-learning course, which you can find on our website. It takes 20 minutes, and you'll see videos from health professionals and lived experience stories. In fact, Nicky Chinn's story is on there as well. And there are quizzes and a little bit of engagement. And you have 20 minutes, but you can improve your understanding of bipolar, and you can share that course far and wide. The more people that understand a little bit about what bipolar looks like, the better. And you can promote Bipolar UK services. As I said, we have an e-community, we have local peer support groups, we have a callback line. We have leaflets that we are making available to all Rotary members, to all clubs that want them, to just go out and put those out in the local area. So you can put them in your local GP surgery, on your hospital notice board, universities, colleges, you know your local area. So you can put those leaflets out. It has the mood scale on the back, which really gets people's attention. And helps them understand a little bit more about bipolar, and then a list of the services that are available. So together we're working towards a vision where we can offer peer support for everybody who needs it. And together with Rotary, we hope to really be able to grow our impact, grow our reach, and provide more support services to those who need them. Next slide, please. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Judith Pratt, who spoke so wonderfully earlier about the brain and the science behind mental health conditions. So Judith is Emeritus Professor at the University of Strathclyde, hugely knowledgeable, as we've heard, about mental health conditions and neuroscience. But she's also a cluster champion for the Rotary Bipolar UK Partnership. So Judith is going to talk to us a little bit. She's going to explain what a cluster champion is, who the different cluster champions are around the country, what they're doing, and what we hope to achieve together. So thank you very much, Judith, for joining us again, and over to you.
Thanks very much for the introduction, Lorna. I must say it's been an absolute privilege working with Bipolar UK. I first met Nicky Chinn, Lorna, and Simon Kitchen, Chief Exec of Bipolar UK, at the Houses of Parliament at the end of last year. And it's absolutely phenomenal the work they're doing. And I just hope that through Rotary, we can harness our networks to improve awareness and fundraise for this really under kind of studied condition where there's so limited knowledge. And that moving presentation by Nicky was really quite phenomenal. I've heard you speak a few times now, Nicky, and it still touches me very significantly. And being in education as well, I think a key thing for everyone, one and all of us, is that education is key to everything. If we want to improve understanding and treatments for mental health conditions. So just to talk a bit about the cluster champion role, could I have the next slide, please? So in order to harness Rotary networks across the country to deliver the Rotary Bipolar Partnership's aims, we established really just, it's quite phenomenal, only in January of this year, the idea of a Rotary Bipolar Cluster Champion. And the idea is they will support the partnership by being ambassadors within their cluster of districts and help communicate partnership news and activities at district and club level. And I am cluster champion for London and the South. The area's in pink on the graph. And as you can see, we've got 6 cluster champions across the country, and also a Rotarac cluster champion, Eleanor Viviani. And we started having Zoom meetings monthly, perhaps a bit more frequently at the moment, to take forward what we're going to be doing and how we're going to do it. And so the two key elements are basically raising awareness and fundraising. So yeah, so to get involved, and we do hope as many clubs across the country will get involved, the partnership, you can support it by promoting understanding, educating, in other words, of bipolar, promote Bipolar UK support services, and fundraise to help Bipolar UK grow their support services. As Lorna said, there's lots of local groups. In fact, many of them I think have gone on hold since the pandemic or during the pandemic. So we really want to get them up and running again and being as effective as they can. So I'm just going to give you a few examples of what's been going on to hopefully inspire you to support this partnership. As Lorna said, you can go on the website to get some ideas, but in District 1145, our District Governor, Roger Stent, organised a Celebrating Rotary conference in Guildford in January, and we had the privilege of hearing Simon Kitchen, Chief Exec of Bipolar, and Nicky Chinn as well, telling his story, and to an audience of 300 Rotarians from across our district. But that was a great way to disseminate information and understanding. So next slide, please. So here you can see a picture of Simon Kitchen giving out his talk at this conference, and Nicky Chinn talking as well. And so, as I said, we had 300 people at that conference. So it was reaching out to clubs in our district, of which we have 86. And so that's the first step to disseminating information and understanding. There was also, we also had a Bipolar UK stall there. And I think a few other clubs have, are going to have a bipolar session at their district conferences. And it's fantastic that Nicky has agreed to speak at these. He's a real ambassador for the cause and for getting behind us all to kind of do something. So district conferences is one way. Next slide, raising awareness in your local communities. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can share the, could it be bipolar to your club? In fact, we did this week, as it was World Bipolar Day on Thursday this week. And giving out leaflets to hospitals, libraries, social prescribers, surgeries, anyone or anywhere you can think of. Last week, our Rotary Club did a short 2-mile walk around our village, handing out leaflets, and we ended up in the pub afterwards, where we also had a pile of leaflets. And it was great to feel that you were doing something, and everyone we spoke to was really engaged with understanding more. But many people said, oh yes, my niece or my daughter or my uncle has bipolar. So it's really impactful doing things like this, you know, to assist Bipolar UK with their cause. Next slide, please. And of course, the second key thing we'd like to do is to fundraise so that Bipolar can reach out to more people and support them, whether that will be local groups, support groups, or whatever. And, you know, if clubs want to get involved, there's lots of ways of doing it for fundraising. You know, you can do a run, a walk, a swim, do things online. You know, if you go to the gym, record how many steps you do, team up with your local support group, run a quiz. But the really big thing that we want to do to next year, which we're kind of in the thinking stages of how we do it, is we want to, on the 30th of March next year, have some kind of celebratory World Bipolar Day walk, maybe a pole-to-pole walk is the idea we're thinking about, bipolar, going from the North Pole to the South Pole, whether that be virtually or probably not in reality, but people can get involved in walks. So we're thinking about ways we can do that. It might be even that we have the districts each recording how far they walk and fundraise, and then we have all the districts putting their miles together, if you like, to get the grand total. Perhaps we'll walk to more than the pole to pole more than once even. So that's the big idea for next year. So do try and get involved, and we'll be disseminating more information about how we proceed with that in the future. So I'm going to hand back to Lorna now, who's going to just sum up a few final points. Thanks very much, Lorna.
Thank you, Judith. No, it's wonderful to hear all the work that you and the other cluster champions are doing. There's a great sense of energy in the team. It's been challenging to disseminate information to all of the Rotary members. Obviously, it's a huge organisation with 32,000 members, and the cluster champions are really helping us to be able to communicate information down through district events and down to club level. So thank you, Judith, and thank you to all the other cluster champions for all the fantastic work that you're doing. Yeah, as Judith mentioned, fundraising is so important, and every penny raised really does make a difference. So we're a charity. We can't run our support services without donations, without, you know, organisations fundraising for us. And I've just given some examples here of you know, how far the money does go. So just £10 would help somebody get peer support from our e-community. £50 would help someone get peer support via a callback or email. £500 would help 820 people find information via our website, and so on. So you can really see it doesn't matter how much money you raise, it's every penny really does make a difference. And by fundraising for Bipolar UK, you're helping us to grow our service provision and support more people to make a far bigger impact. We've got fundraising ideas and inspiration. Judith mentioned a few. There are some others on our website, but we know that, you know, Rotary members will have lots of fantastic ideas as well. So we're hoping that you'll engage and share ideas with each other. But we're here to support you. So you've got a dedicated email address. So please do get in touch if you've got any questions about the partnership or about anything you're doing, you need any support with your activities. Please contact us at rotary@bipolaruk.org. We'd be delighted to hear from you. So yeah, just to summarise the difference that support can make. Now this was some feedback from Emma, who fed back after she attended one of our local peer support groups for the first time. And I'm just going to read out what Emma said. So the group began to share one by one, and I started to realise that this may be the right place for me after all. I shared my experience of a time I was feeling invincible and on top of the world. I felt a huge weight lift from me, along with a lifting of shame, embarrassment and fear of being judged. I realised I didn't need to hold these thoughts and beliefs about myself. I wasn't alone. So yeah, I think a really powerful message about how important it is to know that there are other people that share your experiences. So that's our partnership. Together we want to reach many more people. We want to make a big impact, and together we want to save many lives. And just to conclude, if we could move to the next slide, please. As I mentioned, it's our 40-year anniversary. So we've been running our peer support services for 40 years. And to celebrate, we've made an e-card, especially for our Rotary members, to thank you for engaging with us, for partnering with us, and to thank you for your support.
Thank you, Lorna, and everybody for your presentations. The stories are so powerful. We value the partnership and we look forward to making that partnership stronger as we move forward with all our work. Rotary has had a partnership with the Stroke Association for a number of years now. Unfortunately, they're not able to be with us today, but they have sent a video giving us an update of their work.
So, what is our new strategic approach to stroke prevention? Well, first of all, let's just understand the scale of the issue here. So there's approximately 100,000 people per annum who have a stroke, and 80 to 90% of those strokes are preventable. There's a lot of reasons for those strokes, many of which are to do with modifiable risk factors, and you'll see they're listed in blue, atrial fibrillation being one of them. We know that over time, the number of people having strokes is set to rise quite significantly, and that's why we want to focus on doing something meaningful. So why have we chosen to prioritise atrial fibrillation, and what is AF? Well, it's a type of irregular heartbeat which effectively prevents your heart from emptying blood properly, and it causes blood clots which can travel to your brain. There's about 1.4 million people in England that have got atrial fibrillation, and importantly, up to 500,000 people have got it, but they don't know that they have AF. Now, AF increases the risk of stroke by 5 times, and that means effectively that 15,000 people each year are having an AF-related stroke. So it's 1 in 5 strokes is caused by atrial fibrillation. And importantly, those strokes are more severe with higher mortality and greater disability. And the cost of an AF-related stroke is not insignificant. So why do we want to prioritise AF? Well, it's to do with the size of the prize. For very small interventions, relatively speaking, we can save strokes. If you see that we were to contact 5,000 people about their heart rhythm, doing a pulse check, we could actually prevent 1 stroke in the subsequent year. So as a result of this, we've been weaving the reduction of AF-related strokes and our prevention priorities into an overall approach to how we, the Stroke Association, link with the NHS. We've developed a systems engagement strategy which recognises that there's no easy solutions to a number of complex problems to do with stroke, and we cannot change things on our own. However, if we take a systems leadership approach to our activities, working across boundaries with others, deciding where we want to lead, influence, partner or add voice, and if we do that at a local and a national level, and if we use what we know from our research and from our service delivery perspectives and our community engagement roles, we can make a bigger impact. This slide is very busy. It's just to illustrate that prevention is one of those things that we are focusing on now as a systems leader. In our thinking then around preventing AF-related strokes, we've done quite a lot of logical thinking and have constructed what's known as a theory of change. This slide just gives a short illustration showing that how activities aimed at raising awareness around AF-related stroke and gathering insight from the public and particularly communities who may be at more risk of stroke, how if we do that, we can lead to outcomes of increased awareness, increased understanding, and in turn an increase in the detection rates of AF, an increase in people who are then treated properly for their condition, hopefully a narrowing of any inequalities, and ultimately making an impact on the number of strokes that happen.
So, using that theory of change, that logical model, we embarked upon Stroke Prevention Day 2023, which took place on the 12th of January. I hope that many of you may have seen our website, our social media presence, the newspaper articles, radio articles, etc. that all happened. And here on this slide is a link should you wish to catch up on some of those amazing resources.
We live our lives through the rhythms that surround us.
The ingrained habits and familiar sounds that combine to create a hidden rhythm to life.
Regular and repeating.
Reliable and reassuring.
A rhythm that drives us forwards.
Beating to the tune of our life.
But when that rhythm changes, that's when things start to go wrong.
Someone has a stroke caused by an irregular pulse.
Every half an hour.
Atrial fibrillation, AFib, AF.
Irregular pulse to you and me.
It's common, but is a cause in 1 in 5 strokes.
And an estimated 500,000 people are living with it right now without knowing.
They have a pulse, just like mine.
A rhythm that repeats, just like mine.
But theirs isn't regular.
And they have no idea.
Leaving them 5 times more likely to have a life-altering stroke.
And all you have to do to find out
is check your pulse.
To make sure that the most important rhythm of all
is regular.
Detecting AF can be that easy.
2 fingers on your wrist or neck.
And make sure your rhythm is regular.
Like mine.
And mine.
And mine.
And mine.
And mine. Is it bad that I can't find it?
It's just under there, isn't it?
There it is.
Fast, slow, faint, strong, doesn't matter as long as it's regular.
Check your pulse.
And tell someone you love to do so too.
Well, I hope you really enjoyed that short video. We certainly did at the Stroke Association. And so did a lot of people who fed back to us their thoughts and the impact that that video had today. Some fantastic feedback. We know from our evaluation and lessons learnt that we got really great reach on social media, in part because of the strong engagement of our systems partners. The PR story that we did worked really well, especially regional, with the research and the case studies that we used. And we know that the PR activity led to a lot of people coming to our website and finding out more information about atrial fibrillation, about how to check your pulse, about how to then reduce your risk of a stroke. But there were areas we could improve upon, and we know that we will use those when planning for the next Stroke Prevention Day. So what does that mean in terms of digital opportunities for you at the Rotary? Well, when preparing for Stroke Prevention Day, we did some research, we commissioned some research into public awareness of atrial fibrillation and about how to do pulse checks and whether people knew about the link to stroke. Our researchers spoke to just over 2,000 people across the UK at the end of November. And I'd like to share some of those key findings, but not just the key findings, but the so what that results. So you'll see here, for example, that of those 2,000 people spoken to, only a quarter of them or so knew that atrial fibrillation could cause a stroke. and yet we know there are 15,000 AF-related strokes a year. So for us, the So What message, and we'd like you to help us please, is to continue to promote this video that you've just seen, especially on social media. We'd love it if you could help signpost to our digital resources on our web pages, and or consider raising awareness of a World Stroke Organisation accredited stroke riskometer app. We asked 2,000 people how easy it was to check a pulse and whether they knew how to do it. And there was quite a substantial number of people who didn't know, or who found it very difficult, or when they tried just simply couldn't find their pulse at all. And so we think there's opportunities to signpost people to alternatives, digital alternatives that exist at the moment, whether that be through your watch, your mobile phone, your Fitbit, etc. We were also mindful of some differences between key groups. Men, for example, seem to be less aware of AF, less aware of how to check their pulse, and less inclined to check their pulse. And so it's worth thinking how we can target any awareness raising activity, but especially digital activity, at men. There's a common view that there is a digital divide between old and young. However, the respondents for our survey showed that tech options may be appropriate for all ages when raising awareness. So, please do consider how you can help us at any time in raising awareness. But also please do consider yourselves warmly invited to join us for Stroke Prevention Day 2024. With your help, we can amplify the message, increase the reach, and hopefully save some AF-related strokes. Many thanks for listening to us today.
They didn't actually mention the date for 2024 Prevention Day, but it is around the 12th, 13th of January. That's the date that last year's was around as well. So as soon as I have that date, I will let the people know that are on screen so that you can get into part of that project. And we thank the Stroke Association for all their hard work on looking at their new strategy, which includes what you've heard today. And we thank them for the ongoing partnership that we have with them. For our next presentation, Cowbridge Rotary, like many clubs, have been undertaking work in their local community to raise the profile of dementia, developing a dementia-friendly community. The video you're about to see is the work by the club, and it can be replicated in your area if you're not already taking part in the project.
This short film describes the activities of the Rotary Club of Cowbridge and its support of those affected by dementia. Cowbridge is a small market town and is situated in the southeast of Wales. It still has some of its medieval walls and is a hub for the surrounding, predominantly rural area. Our Rotary Club has 42 members and was established 52 years ago. Dementia is a disease with many forms. It affects mainly older people, but can sometimes occur in younger individuals. It causes memory difficulties, confusion, and can lead to depression. In the worst cases, people with dementia can become angry and violent. A group of people, who have had experience of dementia in their families, decided to do something to improve the facilities in the town for those touched by dementia. both those with the disease and their carers. The dementia-friendly Cowbridge group was formed. Meanwhile, there was a national initiative by the Alzheimer's Society to establish dementia-friendly communities. The objective of a dementia-friendly community is to encourage everyone to share responsibility, to ensure that people with dementia feel understood, valued, and able to contribute to their community. As part of this initiative, people and businesses could become dementia friends by having some simple training. The Marie Curie organization is also supporting dementia-friendly communities in our area. Within Cowbridge Rotary, a subgroup was set up of those Rotarians with a particular interest in dementia. Regular meetings were held on Zoom to develop the activities where Rotary could support dementia-friendly Cowbridge. This was an excellent example of partnership, with a common objective, and, to improve coordination, some Rotarians joined the dementia-friendly Cowbridge group. Let's have a look at some of the projects with which Rotary has been involved. Rotary gave its full support to the launch of the dementia-friendly Cowbridge group. We liaised with local businesses to give guidance on how their business and their staff could become dementia-friendly. Sometimes, this could include advice on how small modifications to their premises could make things easier for dementia sufferers. Becoming dementia-friendly always included a need for some training of the staff. There was a very good response with more than 30 businesses, of all types, responding positively. As dementia sufferers sometimes perceive dark-colored floor mats as a hole in the ground, we came up with the idea of presenting floor mats to businesses that qualified as dementia-friendly, and taking the opportunity to promote Rotary at the same time. A supplier was found that was prepared to produce any size in any color to our design, and we were fortunate to obtain sponsorship for this part of the project. The Rotary name is now on display in businesses and public buildings throughout the town. A new project now is to ensure that mats are regularly cleaned. Other groups in Cowbridge that are running events for dementia are also supported by Rotary. For example, there is a regular memory jar cafe and a golden oldies cinema, held in a church hall, where dementia sufferers and their carers can meet and enjoy games or classic films. Rotary supports these events by setting up and clearing the hall. The youngest members of Rotary, our Rota kids, aged between 8 and 11 years old, visit the Memory Jar Cafe to chat with the older folk. One of the members of our club wrote a song called Remember to Remember, which was in remembrance of his mother who had dementia. Here is a part of a performance by With Music in Mind, a choir with many members with dementia.
Sing the songs of our childhood and those records we used to play. Sing the songs
in Cowbridge,
that made us
there is a
happy.
care home for people with dementia. Our club wanted to improve the quality of life of the residents by providing a Tova-Tefl system. The system enables them to play games using an interactive, computer projection system. Before the COVID lockdown, members of our Interact Club visited the home to assist with the introduction of the system. Thinking about the quality of life, it was recognized that some residents with dementia were missing the personal touch and contact with loved ones, especially during the COVID period. 2 hug dolls were provided to the home.
You go, oh, that's lovely.
With those words, Pauline Jenkins describes the thinking behind a research project at Cardiff Metropolitan University to reduce anxiety in people living with dementia with a hug. It's soft, just the right weight in all the right places. It feels just like a hug.
The town of Cowbridge is not alone in working to support dementia. There are many dementia-friendly groups in the Vale of Glamorgan, where Cowbridge is located. Unfortunately, there was very little, or no coordination, or information exchange between the groups. We were asked by the Marie Curie organisation if we could help. The result is the construction and management of a user-friendly website, giving information about all the dementia-friendly groups in the area, with details of their meetings and events. There are also links to general information on dementia, its development and the search for a cure. Each dementia-friendly group has its own page to highlight their activities, and there is also a shared Google Calendar with details of all the events in the Vale. This website has been actively used since it went live in June 2022. But what of the future? Various projects are being reactivated after the enforced COVID shutdown, and the dementia subgroup in Club is holding regular meetings. We are launching a review of all the dementia-friendly businesses, renewing support for the dementia-friendly Cowbridge group, and, let's not forget the cleaning of the mats. This project has been a great example of what can be achieved by partnership with other voluntary organisations. I would now like to hand over to the Member of Parliament for the Vale of Glamorgan, the Right Honourable Alan Cairns, for a closing statement.
Cowbridge Dementia Friendly Initiative has been a model that has been replicated elsewhere. I've learned from it to try and use in Llantwit Major and in other communities, but I've also shared it with colleagues who've done the same in other parts of the country. I shared it in cabinet discussions to say how a community can come together with the volunteers in order to support people with dementia. And that's the pivot for me. The Rotary Club came together, started the initiative, but it's all of the voluntary groups that added to it that made that difference. It's about the people that put forward the Memory Jar Cafe. It's about the people that put forward the choirs. It's about the people and the businesses that came together and all of the volunteers that make Cowbridge Dementia Initiative so successful.
And I'm sure if anybody on screen wants to hear in more detail about that, we've had our meeting and we are now, as a team, going around the businesses to have the mats re-cleaned, to raise awareness again, as we've heard many times this afternoon, of something that is so needy within the community. I would now like to hand over to Cheryle, our lead for the Humanitarian Service team, to go through any questions that we may have had.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. And it's been a marvellous afternoon. I think it's been a very moving afternoon in the things that we've heard, the things that we've seen. It's been absolutely fantastic. A great credit to you. I know you'll be doing your own thanks later on, but I think it's very mindful that I say to you, this is the 5th of these health fairs online, and every single one has been magnificent. And I am just so pleased that they're recorded so that they can get to bigger audiences as well, because every single thing in them is useful and inspirational. So that's been marvellous. We haven't had many questions sent in. I think, quite honestly, people have been wrapped in so intent on listening and looking. But I have a couple to put, and probably Judith will be the one to answer them. They came in quite early in the afternoon. So if I put the two questions, I think in a way they're linked, Judith. So it's, does neuroscience offer insight and potential solutions to the spectrum of mental health conditions from mild through to severe conditions? This is from Janine Birtwistle, and also from Janine, how does taking melatonin impact on the serotonin, and is it safe to take melatonin? So there's a general one and then a more specific medical aspect. So would you like to take those two?
Yeah, well, the first one is that there is research going on across the world, really, for different mental health conditions. So the Medical Research Council, for example, sponsors or provides, well, doesn't provide, they're very competitive research grants for all sorts of mental health conditions. I mean, the brain is so complex and there's so many conditions, and many of these overlap as well. So you would have anxiety if you suffer from bipolar, but you'd also have anxiety if you suffered from another mental health condition as well. So there is research going on, and there's people with areas of expertise in these different areas. So, you know, I know, for example, there's a research group studying depression in Oxford. There is other research groups in Newcastle, for example, studying other types of mental health conditions, and in Scotland the same. So there are specialists working in their research teams in universities across the country studying different conditions. There are also research institutes as well, and some companies, whether they be large pharmaceutical companies or small to medium enterprises that are researching particular elements. One key thing that people are trying to understand is, you know, for mental health conditions, they're just descriptions of symptoms. We don't have a kind of brain signature for them. We can't measure like the heart rate of the brain like we can in heart conditions. Yeah. So we're now moving a little bit towards that, more towards that with some of the brain imaging and genetic work, but you know, it will be years before that gets into the clinic. So yeah, so bottom line is research expertise, different groups across the country.
Yeah, and the melatonin one?
Melatonin one, yeah, I'm not too familiar with I mean, I know people use melatonin to kind of reset, if you like, sleep-wake cycles. I think there is evidence it can help. And the question about the serotonin system, I honestly don't know the precise answer to that, but a general answer would be that many systems interact in the brain, so I would not be surprised if the serotonin system was affected.
Right, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Judith. I think this next one may be for Lorna. It's just come into the chat box from Valairs, or it could be you as well, Judith. And it's about, are there any particular triggers that are before a bipolar? I can see you nodding already. Before a bipolar episode. This is from Valairs at Cockermouth Rotary.
Yeah. Shall I go first? And feel free to hop in, Judith, if you think of anything else. But yes, there are triggers. In fact, you know, our Bipolar Commission report did highlight a number of quite common triggers. So we know that hormonal triggers are huge for women living with bipolar, in particular certain times of life like childbirth, pregnancy and the menopause. So yeah, they obviously, that plays a huge part. We mentioned sleep, so lack of sleep can be both a symptom of and a trigger for an episode of bipolar. But then there are various other events, and it can be quite surprising, sometimes good events as well as bad events, but things that cause stress. So it could be a new job, moving home, having a baby, even going on a holiday, things which we think are really, really good, but they do raise your stress levels, and all of those things can contribute and trigger an episode. So understanding, obviously for each individual it's different, but understanding what those triggers are and understanding what the kind of stressful life events are can really help people try to manage the condition. Because if you're aware that you're going through, if you're having a child, for example, you might decide not to move house and to take on a new job all at the same time. You might try to kind of manage things so that you're less likely to become unwell. And also when you know that one of those events is going to happen, you can take extra good care of yourself. Just make sure that you are in a routine, that maybe you're reducing your work commitments, reducing other commitments, and putting a lot of effort into making sure that you get really good sleep, exercise routine, that you're taking care of yourself with your diet and things like that. I don't know if you have anything to add, Judith.
Anything to add, Judith?
Yeah, but just one point really, in terms of the kind of mania phase of bipolar, people then become quite impulsive, and we know impulsive behaviours are mediated at the level of the prefrontal cortex. We also know people with alcoholism do also experience that impulsive behaviour. So knowing that if you're suffering bipolar, if drinking alcohol can also kind of exacerbate your condition, and from a neuroscience perspective, you can understand why that might be. And very important, stress, Lorna, as you mentioned, is a huge trigger for many people with many conditions, and we have to look after ourselves to ensure that we limit that, basically. And the other point I want to make, is that we talk about all these conditions like they're separate. And I think I've already mentioned that anxiety can cross many conditions. And there's a big move now to try and not kind of label everything quite so precisely, because there are domains of many, we're all different, basically. And we all have a different kind of spectrum of mood and mental health behaviours. So I think we try and have to get away from kind of pigeonholing everything as well.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you both of you. And I can see Val nodding in there. So I'm wondering, Carol, there aren't any more in the chat box. Do you want to take any questions from the floor? If people put their hand up.
Thank you, Cheryl. Are there any more questions from the floor? Anything that's sprung into your minds whilst don't think so.
I can't see any, Carol. No, I think so. Anyway, thank you very much. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'll hand back now to you, because I know you want to do some thanks yourself.
Thank you very much. Well, I hope you've all enjoyed the very thought-provoking presentations and personal stories as much as I have, and that they have given you food for thought. The presentations will be on the Rotary Great Britain and Ireland YouTube website and the Rotary section of the Bipolar UK Rotary website. Thank you to all our speakers, Rotary International President-elect Gordon, Judith Pratt, Lorna Morgan-Glanfield, Nicky Chinn, the Stroke Association, and Cowbridge Rotary. Thank you to Cheryle for keeping an eye on the questions and looking after the questions, for Janine for her IT skills, for setting up the rehearsal, putting the presentations and videos together so they ran promptly and organised, and for today. And for everybody that has put some time to publicise the event that we've done today. Finally, to yourselves, for taking the time to come, please enjoy the rest of your Saturday and weekend, and do contact me and keep in touch if I can be of any further help and support. Thank you very much indeed, all of you, for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done, everybody. Well done.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you everyone else for coming along.